Hope you're all doing well. Today, we're going to be talking about fraud. In specific, what is fraud and why do people commit fraud? To start us off, what is fraud? Fraud, by definition, is similar to deceit or trickery. It involves the intentional perversion of truth in order to induce another to part with something of value or to surrender some sort of legal right. Fraud is going to be deceiving and typically involves misrepresenting something. Oftentimes, it can also be a person or thing that is not what he, she, or it seems to be represented or pretending to be. TLDR, fraud is an activity that relies on deception in order to achieve some sort of gain, whether it be financial or social. You have to remember, the Supreme Court already ruled that a social gain provides value. The why behind fraud can often be explained via the fraud triangle as noted on the slide. Generally, you have an opportunity, rationalization, or pressure or motivation that involves this fraud. Whenever a fraud occurs, one of the aspects of this triangle are present, typically more. There's either something that allowed for the opportunity for the fraud to take place, such as a lack of internal controls, lack of segregation of duties. Somebody perhaps could have been rationalizing as to why they should commit a fraud, such as not being paid enough money, or perhaps thinking everybody else is doing it, so they need to as well. It could also be from some sort of pressure or motivation. Now, pressures are typically going to be external things, such as excruciating debt or some sort of addiction. And motivation would typically be more internal things, such as some sort of internal incentive, or trying to do something like to impress a woman. The Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, ACFE for short, as you can tell by the logo on the slide, has broken up fraud into three general categories. The first category, against individuals, involves things like identity theft or phishing schemes. The second category, against internal organizations, involves an employee deceiving the organization they work for itself or the organization they volunteer for or take part in. This could be something like falsifying timesheets or stealing from the petty cash. Lastly, there's external organizational fraud. This involves fraud against an organization from the outside. Perhaps you're a vendor billing for services that you have not and will not render. There's been a lot of different frauds over the years. For example, I've got the top 5 US corporate frauds on this slide. You might recognize some of these logos, in particular Enron and Lehman Brothers, as they might be the most recent for you and the most common. But there's other frauds that have been massive and also important, such as Cendant and MF Global. As you can see from the years on these frauds, 2008, 2001, 2008, many of these things happen during financial downturns, as that is when the emperor's robes are removed, and you can see what truly lies beneath on some of these companies when the economy dries up. I think it's important to study some of these frauds. I think the easiest way to look at least one of these would be to watch The Smartest Guys in the Room, which is an old film about the Enron story. I think it's very enlightening, especially if you're a business owner, to see how this thing was happening. I think it's interesting to see how many people were complicit in the wrongful actions, as well to see how the fraud was uncovered. Personally, I have a couple favorites myself that I've enjoyed learning about over the course of my studies. My personal favorite frauds are the Salad Oil Scandal of 1963, Crazy Eddie's in 1987, and Tyco in 2002. Additionally, Krispy Kreme of 2005 gets an honorable mention, and one thing that is interesting but not yet resolved is FTX from 2022. The Salad Oil Scandal of 1963 got overshadowed by the assassination of JFK the following weekend, but it was a very large scheme, and is probably the biggest example of tangible fraud. I highly suggest looking into it because it's quite nasty work they did in order to fake that. Crazy Eddie's was very interesting. Similar to Tyco, they have very eccentric owners who did absolutely crazy things, and that's what makes them really fun to learn about. Krispy Kreme's fraud was a bit more basic, not necessarily complex, and it's something that many smaller businesses get caught doing on a very regular basis. FTX's was an absolute animal house, and that one is quite interesting to see that they brought the person who cleaned up the Enron bankruptcy to clean up FTX's as well. I personally suggest you guys take a look at these when you can. Study these, understand the mechanisms that allowed for this to happen, and try to prevent it going forward. I know we got a little bit off topic in terms of the what and the why of fraud, but I think it's important to take a look at the tangible examples of fraud which have been caught and closed, so that way they can be analyzed to better improve business conditions to not allow these fraudulent acts to happen to begin with. Thank you so much for watching, and please be sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment if you have anything that you'd like me to take a look at. I'd be more than happy to cover or take a look at any other business topics in particular. Thank you so much again. Greatly appreciate it. Bye-bye.